Like she and Fritz have this mutual agreement that Plumfield is going to be this topsy-turvy, upside-down place. If boys' sticky hands make places dirty, that's okay. And we can have pillow fights once a week so they can release their energy. And then it's completely different in the Lawrence house because Amy and Laurie, they like to have these fancy balls and dinner parties and things to be visually pleasing. And I always thought that Amy and Laurie were a match made in heaven because him being a metrosexual, for example, was something that Amy found visually pleasing. And of course, Joe found Frederick very attractive. I really love that scene when Amy and Laurie are in Europe and she pats his hand and says, "This is like a lady's hand. You haven't done any work in your life." And Amy knows the struggles of being poor, and Laurie doesn't have any experiences of that. And then Amy says that Joe hates lazy people. And Amy herself also hates lazy people. And that is Laurie's wake-up call. That's when he turns from a boy into a man. Oh, that scene is never in any Little Woman adaptations between 1933 and 2019. Then if we think about Louisa May Alcott, she worked as a nurse in the war. She took care of sick people. She saw bodies lying around. She wasn't squeamish, maybe because she didn't really consider herself very attractive always. And that also had to do with her illness. When you read Little Woman, there is sometimes criticism the way people tend to pay more attention to the way things look outside than the way they look inside. You know what I mean. Joe is not a very visual person.
I almost forgot about the pillow fight. I was like, oh, that's just so adorable. But yeah, each relationship worked out for each of them in the best way. Friedrich and Joe are a little bit more like, oh, let's just do whatever suits us at whatever time. And Laurie and Amy are like this people who are like, we have to have dinner ready by 5 every day because we just have to. No earlier, no later. But it works for them because that is the lifestyles that they want. And if you have someone like Joe who is like, let's just eat whenever, whatever. And Laurie is like, no, I want to have this specific time with this specific meal. That's going to clash. Again, I think that's what makes how she handles the relationships very well, that it's not even just like, oh, you can trade one sister for another. It's like, no, they're so different. Their relationship with Laurie is so different that it will not have the same outcome as you think that it will. You can't have Laurie just be with Joe and expect it to have the same outcome as Laurie and Amy. It just won't. Not at all. And it's funny, like this is in some ways it's a story of like opposites attracting as well as people who are similar attract. Like you often hear people say differently, like he was someone who is completely different from you, but then you have some people who are like, get someone that is completely the same to you. And I gotta find the passage, but I think Marmee kind of said it perfectly. This is when Joe wants to leave for New York, and Marmee says, oh, I think it's not just because of you wanting to leave, it's also because of Laurie. I gotta find it, but she says that as friends, you are very happy and your frequent quarrels soon blow over. I fear that you both would rebel if you made it so light. You are too much alike and too fond of freedom, not to mention hot-tempered and strong wills to get on halfway with each other. In relation that needs infinite patience and forbearance as well as love. So on one hand, the fact that they are very similar is going to be detrimental to them. That would ruin their relationship, because really what makes a relationship work is what is similar about the two of you is your morals, your points of views on some of the bigger topics of things and of your interests. But you need to be different enough to allow some sort of growth to happen, because if you have two people who are exactly the same and have the same sort of ways of living life, there's a very slim chance, I think, of them progressing into something more deep and meaningful. I think, it's going to be a very kind of like what do you want to do today? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. And then just you do nothing. Versus if you get someone that is at the very least a little different from you and you go, I don't know. What do you want to do? And it's like, well, why don't we do something a little different and out of our comfort zone and let's do it. Let's go. Like, I think that in a way they both have that, like you said, Amy pushed Laurie to be more responsible and to sort of realize like what a grown up he needs to be. And Friedrich kind of helped ground Joe and be, and not to say like he tells her like, you can still have that dream. Like you can still be a writer. You can do it. I believe that you can. In a way, they both, Amy and Friedrich are what Joe and Laurie need because in some ways they ground them, but also give them what it is that they need, not necessarily what they want. Laurie thinks what he wants is a housewife that is just going to do what he wants him to do. What he needed was a wife that is like, you know what, you could stand to do a few chores around this house. I think that's why some people feel like have that idea of like Joe and Laurie would be great together because they're so similar, but like therein lies the problem. They're too similar and they're too like a reflection of each other. And I think if you spend too long and too often with someone that is just like you're going to see some of the more negative stuff about yourself and you're not going to like it. You're going to hate how you are as a person. And then you're going to maybe start resenting that person because you recognize some of the more negative stuff about yourself. And you're like, you know what, I can grow and learn from this. But the person that you're with has not done the same. And you're like, I'm moving ahead and you're staying right there. We want different things. And so, yeah, I think no matter what, Joe and Laurie's relationship would have ended into the disaster because one will grow and the other will not. And you can't have a relationship where you're not going together somewhere. If you eat, whether it's the both of you stay in the one place or one stays and one goes.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you said that, Joe and Frick, they don't really have any reasons to argue. Henry and Louisa, what I read, they have this sort of telepathic way of communication that they would understand each other without words. I think you can see some of that in Little Woman, in Joe's and Frederick's, the way they communicate. Like you said, well, they probably have the least problems in communication when it comes to the different couples in Little Woman because they know each other so well. So it's really interesting that Louisa and Henry would have this sort of telepathic rapport between one another. And, even though Louisa had temper tantrums, Henry was, what I read, quite a peaceful person and didn't really care too much about arguing. I mean, I think it brings another extra layer to Little Woman and to Joe's and Frederick's relationship. I think you can see a lot of that in Little Men, especially when they have this sort of teasing conversation between one another. Well, they really don't argue a lot in the sequels, and they don't argue in Little Woman. Why would they argue? They really don't. They don't have any big conflict. Her and Laurie are the ones who have the conflict. And even with Meg and John, well, I think there was a reason for that argument. And after that, they were a better couple. Meg realized she had problems with leaving behind this idea, but she did wish that sometimes they would have more money. And John realized that, well, Meg has more needs.
It's a growing thing, it's not easy. I mean, I've not yet had to have been in a relationship, but talking between my friend and seeing my sister go through some of her relationships, it's a growing thing, You gotta learn each other's idiosyncrasies and you gotta learn, like, what does it mean to have another person in your life that is so close to you, It's just like when people say, like, when they have kids, they have that realization of like, oh, I just have realized that it's not going to just always be about me. Sometimes it's about them. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily are sacrificing the overall picture of what you want for them, but just kind of taking a step back and going, like, I got to realize that even though I approach this situation this way, it doesn't work when I go with this person of whom I am living with and love and whatnot. So yeah, I think that with Meg and John, because they were already so shy with each other in the beginning of their relationship that it took a little bit more time for them to sort of understand what does it really mean to be in love and to be married. They're such an underrated Little Women couple. It's such a sweet little romance that's like, oh, they love each other, and like, watching them kind of blossom into these developed parents who truly care for their children, surprisingly being a lot more hands-on than you'd expect any man from that time period to be hands-on with their kids. But yeah, it really goes to show that, marriage is not always as easy as one would think.
In Little Woman, when there was the catfishing sequence, I think there was a moment when afterwards Meg was like looking that Laurie wasn't going to do any kind of jokes with John. She was keeping an eye on him more closely because she didn't want nothing bad to happen to John. I think I would do the same if that happened to me. John is really underrated character. Like, I always love that scene when they're in the Camp Lawrence and he's defending Meg being a governess. And he's like, oh, these American girls, then if you are not leaking too. So such a great scene.
I don't really think that moment in particular is really seen in any version. I mean, we do have certain versions that do have like the beach/boating scene and those like first hints of like, oh, I don't have any family to worry about. Meg being like, oh no, well, I would miss you if something were to happen. Like, it's precious. And, the fact that he is so patient with her because like he knows that he loves her, but he knows that maybe Meg isn't fully sure, but he's not pressuring her in the same way that the way Laurie would have. He just is like, it's all right, I'll wait if you'd like, and I'm always here if you do realize that you do love me. But that's okay. You take your time. You do what you gotta do. Something like he is still such a sweet character, and the fact that he just wants he wants Meg to be happy, even at the sacrifice of getting a new coat for her to get it dressed, is just so sweet. And it's such a big moment for Meg to kind of be like, you know what, I don't need a dress, I just need you. And it's such a lovely little relationship that really doesn't get as much love as the other two comparatively. And I think that's a shame.
Both Frederick and John, they feel parallel in that sense that they both feel at some point that they are not worth of this woman. With John is that Meg has all the pressure to marry a rich guy because she is the prettiest of the sisters. And especially Marge wants her to marry some rich man. And then there is that rumor going on that Meg has something going on with Laurie. And Mom is really mad about it, and which is understandable. But I think John also felt that he was too poor for her. Because, Meg came from a poor family too. He didn't felt that he could give what she needed. That's also one of the reasons why he waited for her. I love that scene in Little Woman when Frederick feels that he's not worthy of Joe, but it's also because he thinks that Joe is engaged to Laurie, and he can only base his views on Laurie to what Joe has told him, which is not a lot, annoyed that he's this rich neighbor and Joe's best friend. And that's pretty a lot when you're in love with this girl and you hear that, okay, are they engaged? And he doesn't know that. And then he's so happy when he comes to Concord a year later, and then he finds out that Amy and Laurie are married. Joe is available.
Like, I always kind of, again, props to the 1970 version, as flawed as it is, they do handle that scene exactly as I kind of imagined it in the book, where like, he's like, oh yes, you're the friend. Hi, nice to meet you. And Laurie's like, oh yeah, this is my wife. And he's like, oh, you're married. Okay, well, we can be friends. Like, now there's nothing holding me back from, But the fact that he was willing to gracefully kind of step aside for Joe, if that was the case, is very endearing to, like, it's only until after he realizes that Laurie is married to Amy and is not at all with Joe that he's like, oh, okay, now I can finally say my feelings which is very true with every version. Like when he finds out that there is no Joe and Laurie, it's like, okay, now I can finally say what I feel. Otherwise, before I was just willing to internalize it and just make me feel sad forever. Poor Friedrich. He was willing to do that for Joe if that was what she had wanted, but ended up working well for everyone.
Such a nice scene where he's like, oh, and then the narrator mentions how Laurie thought he was nice. It's a really funny scene. I really love the whole courting episode in the novel. He always wants what's best for Joe.
Again, it sort of makes me go like, oh, you two idiots, you love each other. Like, like how, they always seem to be just happening to meet up at the same spot. Like, oh, I didn't see you there. Maybe I'll go with you to see your sister. And maybe I'll come home for a spot of coffee. I mean, not that I was waiting to see you. Joe being all like, Friedrich, oh, I mean the professor, his coffee this way. Like, it's very clear to everyone except to each other. It would seem that you are madly in love, but I guess love makes you share one brain cell in this case, but then it leads to probably one of the most romantic themes ever, with them just taking shelter of each other under an umbrella and saying how much they just love each other. Just all comes out in this moment of, I believe you're going away, and that makes me sad. It's like, no, I'm not going away. I promise I won't leave you. I love you too much. Like, it's just, I love it. I love that theme so much.
It's a really romantic proposal,
and nothing to give you but a full heart and empty hands, and the whole her taking his hand saying not empty now. It's like, this is true classic romanticism, when people talk about like Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Darcy holding Lizzie's hand, and people want to say Joe and Friedrich are not romantic. How dare you? You must not have read or watched that scene properly.
It's like when people say that Joe and Friedrich are not passionate enough. Then in the umbrella chapter, he's holding his face crying, and then he asks her, why are you crying? And then she's like, 'cause you're going away. And then we find out that he has been keeping Joe's poem with him for months and months. And they pretty much start to make out right after the proposal.
Right. And the fact that Jill, is the one who pretty much jumps on Friedrich, the fact that despite the fact they're in the middle of a muddy road, is like, I just got to kiss you because I can't hold it in, and just them making out while people are passing them and the rain, their clothes are all muddy. Like, who cares? They gotta kiss here and now. Who cares who sees and whatnot? And particularly for back then, that was so scandalous.
Yeah, in the 19th century, it wasn't really seen as appropriate to have such public expression of affection. I read in another Louisa May Alcott novel, in the Verb Story of Experience, because there's the moment when David, who is once again based on Henry David Thoreau, when he confesses his feelings for Christine, who is the protagonist, he almost has the similar blurt that Friedrich has in the umbrella chapter, that he's been holding all these feelings inside, and then he just lets it all out there when he confesses his love for her. And I think, something that Louisa kind of recycles in her stories. I think there's something similar in Rose in Bloom, when Mac confesses his feelings to Rose. When I read about Henry, he's quite similar to Frederick in that sense, that he would take his time to think things through before he would express his opinion or something that he really wanted to say. There's a lot of descriptions about him that he was sort of more of a deep thinker, and then also in some ways very passionate person. Yeah, I think some of that must have come from Louis' own experiences.
Oh my goodness.
Well, thank you, Christina, for joining me. This was lots of fun.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me. I've never been a part of a podcast before, so this is very exciting for me. And I hope that the listeners get a chance to, enjoy it as much as I did.
I can find you at Tumblr from the Joe and Frederick blog. It's a great blog. People go and read it.
Thank you, Canada.
That was our chat for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and make good choices. Bye.
Hello, friends. It is Niina from the Little Woman podcast. Just to let you all know that the Little Woman podcast episode transcripts are now available as books. You can find them as paperbacks and ebooks. They are wonderful reading for all the fans of Louisa May Alcott. You can find all the links from the description.